Hello everyone, I'd like to invite you to my channel. Before we get started, I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It's really quick and easy, but it'll make me really happy. So, let's get on with the story. Donna took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, brushed away a threatening tear and reached deep inside herself for a reservoir of power she never knew she had. Despite the guilt and pain in her heart, she opened the door and went inside. She went into her husband's office. He looked up from his desk, and she stopped. He was a good-looking man, not like Gil, more like a movie star. He also had something Gil didn't have, a personality. These traits, combined with the love he had for her and their children, made him far more attractive than any man she had ever met, except for one slip-up. One slip-up and now everything had to change. Those she loved would suffer. Her marriage was ruined by her own actions, and her family was at risk of falling apart. What was I thinking? She asked herself. Of course, I wasn't me. I was calm, despite the emotional turmoil inside her. She turned to her husband. She was determined not to cry, knowing that he couldn't bear to see her tears and that it could confuse and already difficult to explain the situation. She needed to be open and honest with him, not manipulate his feelings. Honey, she said. We need to talk. It wasn't original, but it was a start. I need to tell you something that will hurt you and make you very angry. First of all, I have to ask you to please me. I need you to give me your gun that you keep in your desk. She nodded and took a deep breath. Steve leaned back in his chair, his surprised look obvious. He slowly unlocked a drawer and took out a huge pistol without taking his eyes off her. He handed her his Smith & Wesson Model 29. She took a moment to register that it was a .4 Magnum before taking it from him. He had already told her what it was called several times, but she could never remember, so they usually just called him a cannon. She stared at him as if he were a snake just waiting to pounce. She had forgotten how big and heavy it was when she tried to squeeze it into her huge purse. Now, could you tell me? It could be so bad that you're afraid I might shoot someone with this thing. She looked at him, studying his face. His concern was obvious, it was mixed with love and something else, fear. He tried to hide it, but it was his voice. It's me. I'm sorry, Steve. She said softly, her voice trembling. I wish there was another way to say this, but She paused, her stomach churning. I cheated on you. Her stomach churned as she stopped. She knew the pain she was feeling couldn't compare to the heartbreak she saw in her husband's eyes. She watched his tears fall and his jaw clench. Then his face lost all expression, as if turned to stone. She prayed that the death she witnessed was only his trust in her, not his love. When he did drugs, and more importantly, why? At Gil's party, when she asked about why, she wasn't really sure. She knew it wasn't the answer they both wanted to hear, but it was the most honest one. There was an eerie silence as she stared at her husband, trying to read his reaction. He sat almost motionless, trying to make sense of her confession. She said, I've been drinking, but not enough to justify my actions. She began quietly, all I can think about is that I was too calm. I let my guard down. I was around people I trusted. I drank just enough to feel at ease and allow myself to enter a situation that turned terribly wrong in a matter of seconds. I don't know how it happened, but I was in his arms before I realized it. Her husband growled at Gil's. She replied peremptorily, I'm sorry, Steve, but it was with Gil. He wanted me to look at his new office. She saw her husband. She flinched, knowing he'd gather as much info as possible before reacting. When we arrived, he hugged her. I don't know, Steve. I can't explain it. He was always flirting, but that's what happens to all women. I probably trusted him. I thought the situation was harmless. And worst of all, I believed I could handle anything if something ever happened. Obviously, I was wrong. The next thing she remembers is, he started kissing me. I think it was because I was so surprised, or maybe I was just stunned. I didn't resist. You said you were drunk. Could someone have put something in your drink? She shook her head sadly. I wish I could say that I was drunk or drugged, but I can't. I should have just slapped him and walked away. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't have betrayed you and our family. Instead, it took less than 20 minutes to ruin everything. Everything happened in 20 minutes. Donna felt herself blushing. He took me. No, I let him take me straight to his office. I slipped and fell off a cliff. It was just one careless oversight. Maybe you shouldn't have come so close to the edge. It's not fair. I've been alone with Gil many times and nothing even close to that has ever happened. That's what you say. I understand why it's hard for you to believe me now, but it really was I made a mistake. If it had happened more than once, I'd be an even bigger fool if I came here and confessed knowing it was a lie. Steve, I swear to you it never occurred to me that Gil would ever physically hurt me. I would never have thought that my wife would give herself to another man like some dog in heat. Donna felt her heart stop. His reaction wasn't unexpected, but she prayed it wouldn't be so harsh. Slowly she began to breathe again, realizing that her worst fears were becoming reality. You're right. I can't tell you how ashamed I am after it. I went home and had a shower. I tried to wash away all traces of him, but I was still haunted by the memories of my infidelity. That answers another one of my questions. Steve grumbled, which one without a condom? She shook her head and looked down. Steve, I'm not trying to make this any less than a terrible betrayal, but it wasn't planned. There was no conscious thought. It all happened so fast that I didn't even have time to think. If I had done that, I wouldn't have done it. She went to the clinic and had a checkup earlier. I know I'm still on the pill this week, but I was so scared I had to make sure. So why did it take you so long to talk to me about this? Or weren't you going to do it at all? Donna took a deep breath and began answering your first question. I struggled with my guilt and fears. I felt ashamed and guilty for not having a clear reason for what I did. I was also scared. I was afraid that what I had done would destroy our family. My actions damaged our marriage, and I was trying to come to terms with the possibility that you would kick me out. I'm not sure if I'll tell you. I was trying to figure out how to talk to you about it tomorrow night, but I haven't decided anything since yesterday. Then quite recently something happened that made my confession necessary. What did he give you? A sexually transmitted disease? No, the results showed that I am clean, at least physically. She looked at her husband with fear. His reaction to her confession was expected, but the way he would react to the next part scared her. I just got back from lunch with Gil. Steve was getting ready to give me another piece of advice. He growled, "You should talk about what happened." I replied quietly, ignoring his question. I said, "Steve, I told you I'm not interested. There's nothing more to say. Let's meet in the office." He said, "There's more." He wanted to meet at Sanderson's. I went to the meeting, thinking I could explain to him that it was a mistake and I wouldn't do it again. When I got there, I was the only one who was surprised. Steve tried to blackmail me. He was trying to turn me into a cheater for his company. Dawn told her husband about what was said at their meeting. At the meeting, she told them about Gil's threats and his demand that she be free that evening to entertain his clients. Donna also said that she wasn't the first person Gil tried to blackmail. She watched with concern as he gathered information when she finished. He sat back in his chair and was silent for a few seconds, then finally spoke. His voice was cold, and it made her shudder. He said, "So you still have the photos he tried to blackmail you with? But I beg you not to look at them. It's one thing to know that your wife has betrayed. It's one thing to know your wife has been unfaithful, but it's another to see her acting like a cheater. Please, Steve, don't look at them." They stared at each other in silence. Donna felt an overwhelming sadness when she saw his determination. Reluctantly, she handed him the envelope without looking at it. He opened it and began to study the photographs. He stopped at a photograph of Donna on her knees. Donna felt her face start to turn red with shame. Her husband's once impassive face was distorted by intense pain, which soon turned into anger. When did Gil say his clients were coming? Well, he said he'd be free at 7. If he sticks to his usual routine, he'll take them to the country club first and try to impress them. Donna disagreed and suspected that Gil would return to his office until his clients arrived. However, she had a very bad feeling and didn't say anything. She said, "I wanted to talk to you before contacting the police." She tried to sound calm, but she was worried. "Don't worry, Steve," he replied, his voice cold and emotionless. "I understand why you asked for a gun." To be continued. I had a heart-to-heart with my former best friend. She started to walk past him and walk away. He instinctively reached out to her, but he roughly pushed her hand away. "Get your hands off me. You dirty, __, cheater." What happened? I've never seen Steve like this before. Donna slowly gathered herself up and stood up, looking into her friend's worried face. She whispered, "I heard him, Darlene. I have offended my husband very much." Sighing, she closed her eyes and grabbed onto something positive. "At least I have his gun, so he doesn't do anything stupid." "His gun?" Darlene asked. "Which one is it? The big one he keeps in the desk or the one in the truck?" Donna looked at her. "He was just holding the first gun. I thought that was it. I was wrong. He has another one. He's clever. My brother calls it SIG or something like that. I don't know much about guns. I just know they're dangerous. Darlene, I need your help. Please call your brother. Steve might actually hurt someone." "Did you offend anyone?" "Oh my God, what happened?" "I didn't get into the details." Dawn told Darlene about her infidelity and Gil's blackmail. When Darlene asked if she had any evidence, she gave her an envelope with photos and said that any other evidence would probably be found in Gil's office. She also mentioned her suspicions that the same thing had happened to others, including the Dalgs. Darlene left and made some calls, then she returned to her unhappy friend. "I called my brother and he went to the country club to try to intercept Steve. I need to meet my sister. I'll be in touch. I'll leave these photos with you while I'm away. Why don't you lie down in Steve's office?" "No, I need to pick up the kids. They're still at school in kindergarten." "I know, but I need to see them." "Darlene, they'll help me keep me on the ground." "Donna, you can barely walk, let alone drive a car. I'll drop it off and then I can stop and pick up the kids. This shouldn't be a problem since I've done it before. Besides, you need to take a break and collect your thoughts. I wish I could tell you that the worst is over, but we both Steve must be in a really bad way to feel like this. I don't know if he'll make it through this, but Donna, there's still hope. He loves you like no one I know. I don't know what will happen, but you need to think about how you can show him that your marriage is worth fighting for. I'm sorry, I don't have any suggestions, but you need to come up with something and quickly." Donna nodded slowly, returned to Steve's office and closed the door behind her. She heard the front door of the office close and she realized that Darlene was on her way. She knew her betrayal would soon become public knowledge. With a soft, sad sigh, she walked over to the small sofa and curled up on it. Her thoughts were spinning, making it difficult to focus on anything in particular. Finally, her gaze fell on the photo that was on Steve's desk. It was a picture of the two of them and the children when they went to the beach. She'd persuaded an elderly couple to capture this moment using their mobile phone. She remembered every child's face as they squealed with delight when she poured a bucket of water on their unsuspecting fathers. She was laughing so hard that she forgot to run away after her sudden attack. Steve quickly grabbed her and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. She screamed when he acted like he was going to drop her. He paused and winked at her with a warm smile. She hugged him and gave him her plea for forgiveness. She gave him a smoldering kiss. All three of their children were moaning and choking. Donna smiled sadly. At the memory, it was a cherished moment for them, and she couldn't help but wonder if their future awaited more of them. It's funny how the mind works, she thought to herself. I wonder why I didn't remember that the night I ruined my marriage. Her thoughts were rudely interrupted by the opening and slamming of the office door. She had just gotten up when Gil burst into Steve's office. He looked surprisingly calm and only slightly annoyed. "I thought Darlene would never leave," he said. "I was trying to catch you before. You made a mistake, but after I saw Steve run out of here in a complete frenzy, I'm pretty sure I was too late. If you're asking if I told Steve, then you're right, you're late, you're a stupid fool." "You're right again," Donna replied calmly. "That paints a different picture, of course. Not on average, given how you felt about it. I admit I got caught up in this moment. I was a fool, but that was nothing compared to the sheer stupidity you showed when you tried to blackmail your best friend's wife into becoming your corporate cheater. Now it's just stupid." Gil's response was not what she expected when he smiled maliciously. "Not one of my highlights, but in my defense I was trapped." Donna looked at him puzzled. "I didn't think I just took the so why did you write it down?" "Insurance," he said in a businesslike tone. "I realized you'd probably feel too guilty and end up confessing to Steve. But after a few days you still haven't done it, so I thought I still had a chance to keep you from ruining both of us. I had to raise the stakes to ensure your silence. After all, it was a calculated gamble. As the old saying goes, for a penny, for a pound. Now the question is, who we are." His cell phone interrupted him as Donna answered him. She watched his confident expression turn into a look of frustration. "When did he leave?" He turned and stared at her. "Oh no," I hope she asked with a bit of a challenge in her voice. "You silly guy, did you tell him that I was trying to blackmail you? Did you show him the photos?" Donna nodded. "Well, you've really messed things up." Shaking his head, Gil sat down heavily in Steve's office chair. Don could see flashes of intense anger darkening his usually handsome face. "Damn it," he muttered. Donna said, "I've already called the sheriff." Gil grinned and stared at her. "Blackmail? I'd believe it if I didn't know you better. These photos are probably nothing. I could swear that we had an affair and that you knew I was making them. I just wanted to give you some souvenirs from our last escapade, the mementos you asked for. Of course, this should confuse things long enough so that I can go back and make sure that I didn't miss deleting any evidence. Even if it doesn't work completely, it will make things more complicated enough to delay any arrests or charges. I've heard that South America is fine this time of year, but now I have a more serious problem. This call was from one of my friends at the country club. It looks like your husband was just looking for me there, while I have a good chance of detaining the authorities. Your wrinkled smug husband is a completely different matter. He may want to find me because I betrayed him, or he'll believe you're tearful. The blackmail story doesn't look good either way." Gil grumbled as he opened the desk drawer where Steve's gun had been kept. He shook his head and sighed. "No, it's not going to end well." Donna started to say something about Steve not having that gun, but she stopped when Gil pulled out his own gun. He checked it carefully and put it in the ready position with a loud click. He slowly placed it on the table. Donna whispered incredulously, "It's called a Glock." "This is crazy. What are you doing?" A devoted angry eye for an eye. "I'm looking for a husband who'll stand up to Steve." "What do you think will happen?" "My call said that Steve left the country club just before some deputy sheriff arrived. He'll probably go to my office first, but he'll come back here eventually. Hopefully he'll understand the reason, but we both know that's probably unlikely. Let's face it, our little transgression probably ruined his perfect little world. Please, Gil, don't do this, just go away. Steve's not going to stop, and to be honest, I'm not going to look over my shoulder until I could get out of town. I might even be able to get away from him for a little while. If the gun doesn't work, I'll have to threaten to harm your children. I'll just have to hold him for a day or two. It's better to deal with it now." Donna carefully reached into her purse. She pulled out Steve's gun, pulled the hammer back, and tried to aim at Gil's chest. She struggled, but she couldn't stop her hands from shaking. The gun was so heavy at the sound of the cocked trigger. Gil's eyes, he widened his eyes, and a grin appeared on his face. "Oh my God," he chuckled. "What a big gun you have. Get away from the gun." Donna squeaked, her voice betraying her. Go to hell. He chuckled slowly, reaching for his gun. I'm already there, Donna whispered, closing her eyes and pulling the trigger. There was an explosion, and Steve's office became surreal. She winced at the sharp pain in her shoulder and her arm was partially numb. The huge pistol was lying on the floor next to her, where she had dropped it. Glancing at Steve's desk, she saw the huddled mass that was her husband's best friend. She couldn't see his face, but a dark pool of blood began to gather under him. Through the ringing in her ears, she thought she could hear a siren. Donna staggered back against the wall and slowly slid to the floor. She looked at the motionless body and realized that now Steve, I have to tell you something. I love you. I'm so sorry. Please find a way to forgive me. Some people think it was just one blunder. To others, it was a monumental act of betrayal. To some, it was a sad human mistake. But no matter how you look at it, it was the destruction of a marriage. You will have to pay a price for it. It will cost you your life. Changing price because it requires victims. Donna sat down on the bench and looked at her bright orange prison clothes and snorted, orange is the new black. Yes, that's right. She looked at her husband, who was looking at her through the glass. He looked exhausted, but he was still handsome. She prayed that someday she would feel his arms around her again. She reminded herself not to get too hopeful, as there was still a chance. He was going to file for divorce. The last few months had been hell for her and for him and their family. The media circus and the trial had thrown them into the public eye. There was the treason, the blackmail, and the Smith & Wesson .44 Magnum, which gave the internet more than enough to spend a day in the field at their expense. There were countless photos of her spreading. There were also the memes, come on, make my day. Are you lucky and dirty, Donna? If she was surprised by the social chaos created by her blunder left her stunned by the way the trial went. Her lawyer said it best at the beginning of the fiasco, it probably would have been better if she had killed Gil. Well, Gil is not dead, and there are many reasons why a person does not close their eyes when firing a pistol. The target is obvious. And yet when Donna fired, she managed to hit Gil in the shoulder. A bullet of this caliber left a big hole, although he did not die. From the moment he was shot, he bled to death before help arrived. He ended up in the hospital and was unable to carry out his escape plan. He was arrested before he was cured, regardless of whether he was trying to play some kind of legal game or just take revenge. His testimony contradicted Donna's testimony so sharply that an overly aggressive prosecutor pursued both of them. They initially claimed that they acted in self-defense. The defense argued that it was a case of self-defense and that they were acting in the heat of passion. However, the jury was unable to prove that Gil had reached for the gun because of his contradictory testimony. What was provable was that Gil didn't have a gun in his hand when she shot him. She didn't know which was crazier, the legal system or that anyone. I thought she'd be fair. These first few weeks were full of dark legal twists and accusations. As more and more evidence of Gil's past blackmail emerged, karma began to balance things out. Public opinion quickly gained ground for Donna. It also worked in her favor that the gun wasn't considered semi-automatic. The gun was automatic, which meant the potential maximum sentence was reduced. The DA, knowing he would soon be re-elected, quickly offered a deal. She pleaded guilty to a lesser crime, which still meant a maximum term of several years. It could have been a lot worse, but it wasn't ideal. The judge took several things into account when he eventually sentenced her to county jail, which is usually reserved for sentences of up to a year. Donna's lawyer was confident she would be released early and would probably serve only 6 months. The judge took several things into account when he eventually sentenced her to county jail, which is usually reserved for sentences of up to a year. Donna's lawyer was confident that she would be released early and would probably serve only 6 months. Justice is not just blind, Donna whispered sarcastically. She also said she was a psychopath and that she had PMS. I said I have to learn not to talk to myself. She replied with a slight smile. He smiled back. Sometimes it's the only way to know what you're thinking. Steve, she whispered, staring intently into his face. All you have to do is ask. I will try to be as honest as possible. I know. They both knew there were countless before she was sentenced. They had some pretty intense conversations. They were brutally honest and painful, and they always ended the same way. Donna was feeling depressed, and Steve was upset and angry. Donna had to admit that she was actually relieved when she started serving her sentence. It relieved her of the tension that was in her home life. I watched him squirm before he stammered out his first question, "How are you doing?" "Just great," she replied, with a hint of sarcasm. "Yesterday, the girls and I were sunbathing by the pool," he said, trying to clarify. "That's not what I meant," she replied, with a smile. She couldn't help but laugh at the thought of her and the other prisoners lounging around the pool. "This is my prison," she said. "It's considered one of the best in the state, with a reputation for being clean and low-key, but it's not a resort. I was just trying to lighten the mood a bit." She smiled at him gently, her love for him still strong, although their current living conditions made their relationship very strained. "I'm fine, thanks. It's much better now. I'm staying out of the way and keeping to myself, of course. Being around Mia helps." Donna studied her husband, waiting for some kind of reaction. She knew he wouldn't show it, but she made similar statements every time he visited her. His lack of reaction didn't stop her from believing that he had a hand in Donna's first few weeks here were pretty rough. There were nights when she was so upset she fought back tears, but she managed to keep it to herself. She couldn't completely hide her appearance, and it attracted unwanted attention. Shortly after she mentioned this to Steve, she met Mia. Mia was an intimidating 45-year-old. Mia was an old, obese, heavily tattooed, mixed-race woman who was serving the last part of her sentence after being transferred from a medium-security state prison without any discussion. Mia and Donna became friends, and it became known that Donna was with her, which surprised Donna. Mia demanded that Donna behave submissively and keep her mouth shut about their relationship. One day, Donna tried to subtly broach the subject with Mia, but only once Mia's outburst made Donna nervous. "Stick your nose where it doesn't belong and you'll regret it. Just keep your mouth shut and you'll get out of here safe and sound." Donna understood, but now she was even more sure that Steve was involved. However, he denied it, and she certainly wasn't going to discuss it with Mia again. "How are the children?" "They're fine. I'm adjusting a little. I have some drawings that I can bring if you want." "No, I've already told you that I don't need anything from them while I'm here. Steve, it's too hard for me to keep being reminded of what I'm feeling low, so please just tell them how much I love them and miss them." "They miss you too." "I miss them too, but if I break down here it will be very bad for me. Please don't ever bring them here, Steve. It's enough that my husband and parents see me like this." Donna leaned back in her chair and sighed when she began her incarceration. Her mother moved in with Steve and the children to help during the first week she was allowed to visit her. Steve and her parents were there after that. Steve and her mother alternated on visiting days. "Mom seems to be feeling better." "I'm glad to hear she was a great help. You know, she was worried you'd divorce me while I was here and get full custody of the kids, and then you'd leave and she'd never see her grandkids again." Steve grimaced and shook his head. "I told you both I wouldn't. Let's talk about this after you're released." "What if I'm not released sooner?" "There's no guarantee that this will happen. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Look, Donna, I'm trying to be as fair as I can to all parties involved. I know you were trying to protect me from being in a place like this for the rest of my life, even after what you've done with him. I just sometimes wonder why you went to such an extreme." Steve replied softly, "You know why?" Steve nodded, but sometimes she needed to hear it again. She reminded herself that this was a positive thing. It meant that her husband was focusing on her actions after her blunder and not on the betrayal itself. It gave her reason to hope. "I'm sorry," he said, interrupting her thoughts. "I'm not going to make you go through this again?" "No, it's all right. I know it was tough for you not to have a clear reason why I slipped, but I know exactly why I shot Gil. Steve, I love you, even if my actions that night at the party didn't show it. When Gil pulled out his gun, I saw my future flash before my eyes. I saw how I tried to explain to our kids why their dad couldn't come home because he was in prison. If Gil had shot you instead, her voice faltered and she quietly pulled herself together before continuing. I saw life without you and couldn't accept it. I was the reason for this, and I needed to make sure that you and our family didn't suffer even more because of my failures. I let you down once, and I wasn't going to let you down again. The only thing I really regret, other than the miss, is that I closed my eyes when I shot him. Despite that, it turned out pretty well. Her husband chuckled. Gil probably wishes you'd killed him now too. I was afraid the judge would agree with his defense. Donna said softly, and declare him a sociopath. Fortunately, he didn't do it, although it showed that he had several sociopathic tendencies. What the hell was he even thinking about? I have no idea. Are you blackmailing women to become your corporate cheaters? It's just asking to get caught. The excitement of beating the odds probably prompted him to do something so stupid. Of course, he was Lou. He'd never traveled to Las Vegas. Donna gave him a sly smile in return. He thought, I'll accept his blackmail. He was wrong. He didn't think she'd tell you everything again. He was wrong. He was also mistaken in believing that he'd be able to leave the area quickly enough to avoid the police. With such thoughts, he'd probably end up in a shallow grave somewhere in the desert. If he went to Las Vegas, they both laughed, but then the awkward silence returned. She said softly, the fact that he has some of these tendencies explains some things. Sociopaths are experienced liars, which would explain how he managed to fool us and all our friends. It's not an excuse, Steve, but it was a factor in all of this. He deceived us all, but the worst thing was my stupidity. Steve nodded slowly in agreement. Donna said carefully, did my stupidity? Donna, you know where we are with this. I know, but like you, I need to hear it sometimes too. Steve shifted uncomfortably on the bench. First of all, I love you. I'll probably love you for the rest of my life. I've already told you that I've forgiven you. I will not carry such anger and bitterness in me. It's like poison. But Donna, that doesn't mean we're okay. You hurt me worse than ever before. I know. I'm sorry, Steve. I wish I could take back my actions, but I can't. She knew this conversation was going to be difficult. It has always been so. He needed to talk, and she needed to listen. The words he would say would hurt. Seeing what her infidelity had done to him would be torture. But it was necessary. If he didn't talk, it could fester and poison any chance of their marriage going through. I'm still struggling with all this, Donna, your betrayal, Gil's betrayal. I'm not sure I would have killed him, but I definitely planned to hurt him that day if he pulled out a gun and threatened our children. I can't say I would have shot him, no matter how it all started. He said softly, you sacrificed yourself for me. That alone gives you the right not to worry about the divorce while you're here. They sat and stared at each other for a few awkward moments. Before Donna spoke, her mom said, Connie still spends a lot of time at the house. Steve nodded. I know it's about your mother, but I can't just send her away. Connie is really lost right now. Donna, when everything became known about Gila, almost everyone we know shunned her. She was all alone, kind of like me. Donna replied quietly, unable to hide her fear and jealousy. Yes, her husband, but she didn't do anything to deserve it. She suspected. It seems that Gil was having affairs, but Sue Dahlgren said that he even bragged that his wife didn't know anything about it. However, Donna blames herself for turning a blind eye to Gil's deception. She feels that if she hadn't done it, maybe all this could have been prevented. I seriously doubt it. It seems that Connie was an even bigger trophy wife than any of us suspected. I was told that she was probably a so Donna nodded, as it matched some of the things she now suspected about Gil and Connie. She stared at her husband in silence, trying to formulate the question she was afraid to ask. Steve said softly, nothing has happened and nothing will happen. Donna began softly, you. Steve snorted at the strength of his response, surprising her and catching the attention of one of the guards after the warning. He calmly continued, yes, there are several possibilities, and Connie is definitely a very beautiful woman. However, I couldn't do that to her. She is my best friend's wife, and even though he turned out to be a piece of __, she doesn't deserve to be used if I did. I'd take advantage of her playing on her guilt and fears. This will change me in some way. I might turn into someone I don't like, no matter what happens between us. I have to keep trying to be the kind of person I want to be. Donna, I'm trying to do the right thing. I can't just throw away our last 15 years. I understand what you've done to try to make things better. You're here, and I appreciate your sacrifice. However, Donna, I'm having trouble moving on from what you did. I'm still struggling with how you could just forget about me and our relationship. Donna started to say something, but Steve interrupted her. You say you love me, but I have to question it. Even if it's true, is it the same love that allowed you to change? Is this the same love that couldn't stop you from sleeping with another man in the heat of the moment? Donna, you're a beautiful woman and I know that guys will keep hitting on you. What happens when the next handsome stud decides he wants you? Are you just going to get hit by some Martian cheating ray and just jump into bed with him? His words stung, and Donna barely restrained a sharp response. Her anger wasn't directed at him, it was caused by the absurdity of her current situation. She betrayed her marriage. She took full responsibility for it, but it was something that happened to countless spouses over the centuries. In her case, everything went like a snowball. She cheated, but then the alleged friend she was cheating with tried to blackmail her when she confessed to her husband. Things got even stranger and turned into some kind of Wild West show in which everyone seemed to have guns. Then, to top it all off, she shot Gil. She was protecting her family, but since he didn't actually have a gun, now she was in prison, protected by a woman who had scared the hell out of her while her marriage was on life support. It didn't just snowball, it was a damn avalanche. She felt as if that avalanche had thrown her off a cliff, and now her husband was the only one who kept her on the safety line. In her previous life, this feeling of helplessness, Donna was really annoyed. She took a deep breath and tried to stay positive. Not everything was lost, so there was still hope. She could still fight for her marriage and family. She knew that Steve still loved her. It was damaged, probably for life, but it was still there. He also forgave her. She was grateful for that, but she knew what it really meant. Steve had to make the same choice over and over. It would eventually become an afterthought, but for now, it was an everyday occurrence. Donna knew that although her mistake had been forgiven, the memory of it would never completely disappear. The scars would remain forever. She sighed to herself. She realized that the biggest obstacle facing them now was simple trust. Her actions had destroyed one of the key foundations of their marriage. The foundations on which their marriage was built were now a chasm where there had once been solid rock. Trust can be restored, but it will never be the same as before. The healing will be long and very painful. Was it worth it? Was their marriage worth the pain, anger, and hard work that now awaited them in the future? She believed it and hoped Steve felt the same way. She also knew that the war that was raging in her mind, her husband wasn't in his heart, but in his mind. The question of whether she would cheat on him again was all he could think about. It was a battle of logic against faith and fear. She was losing. She had plenty of time to think, and time to think was something she had in abundance, given that she was in prison. One of the key points was that she didn't have a good reason for her blunder. She knew it was true. This was tearing her husband's mind apart. His comment about the Martian cheater, Ray, confirmed this. She knew she would have to give Steve something that wouldn't offend his reasoning. The argument is that if you don't know why something happened, how can you protect yourself from it? This would not be overcome easily or quickly. However, this had to be dealt with immediately. Steve needed something he could understand to help him get over any remaining doubts. She took a moment to collect her thoughts before continuing. Steve, you asked how you could be sure this wouldn't happen again. The truth is, there's no way I can guarantee that I'll never fall again. I wish there was something I could do or say to give you complete peace of mind, but you'll never be 100% sure. Nobody can ever be 100% sure that they or someone they love won't fall. But I can honestly tell you that the chances of me falling before I slipped were greater than they are now. I don't know about you, but I think it's worth explaining. I know a lot of people say that once a cheater is always a cheater, but that's not really true. It's like saying that a teenager who shoplifts will always be a thief, or a student who continues to drink in college will be a drunk for the rest of his life. I understand that once someone has cheated, it's easier to cheat a second time and even easier the third time. However, Steve, people change. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I hope we all learn from our mistakes, but many of us don't. Things change just as people's circumstances change. That's why no one can be fully insured. I can honestly tell you that I'll have even less chance of slipping again. She saw her husband struggling with this logic but was grateful that he allowed her to explain his thoughts. Steve, we've both been betrayed. I say both of us because you trusted him as a good friend and foolishly believed that was safe. We were both wrong. We were both naive. We were like those who live in a gated community and believe they're safe from crime. But are they really? I don't think so. We forgot about that, and we were deceived by someone from our community. Steve Gill got me because I was arrogant and careless. I trusted him myself in the situation and let him stand behind my protection. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust anyone like that again. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust any of our friends again. I'll trust them enough to interact with them and even sometimes share some things, but it'll never be the same. It's like a home security system that'll never let anyone get that close again, but the home security system is only good against threats outside the home. I know I ruined our marriage and now you don't trust me, but you don't have to. I showed I let us down in a way none of us expected. Now she's saying that this lack of trust will help make sure it doesn't happen again. You'll naturally be more suspicious, and I'll be even more careful. I'll never be able to trust myself because I'll always know that if circumstances go wrong, I may fall. But Steve, I believe that over time I will be able to regain some of that trust. It'll never be the same again, but it can still be good. I hope that the love you still feel for me, along with our dedication to our children, will allow you to give me a chance to start winning your trust again. I know it's a bit selfish, but I want a chance to help heal some of the wounds I've caused. I love you, and I can promise that I will do everything I can to help heal our family. Steve sat quietly thinking about what she said. Steve finally replied, "Thank you. I appreciate it, but I need to think about what you said. I love you too, Donna, but I'm not sure I can get over it. I know that our friends and family have their own opinions about what I should do. I'm not trying to sound smug, but at the end of the day I'm the one who has to live with my choices." "If you can't," Donna whispered. Steve looked at her for a few moments without saying anything. She could see the many different emotions playing on his face. "I don't know. I think we'll have to face it if that happens." The following months were difficult, but Donna quickly settled into a routine. She had too much time to think, which was both a blessing and a curse. Her fears were somewhat dispelled when her mother informed her that Connie had returned to the East Coast. She tried to keep a low profile and was rewarded by being left alone. She kept her mouth shut, her ears open, and stayed in Mia's shadow. She soon gathered enough information to guess the reason for Mia's unexpected generosity. It turned out that Mia's 2 daughters and grandchildren were accepted into a program that relocated them from the slums they lived in to a decent suburb and a small renovated house. It was a smart move to realize that the design of the mechs was an important part of the project. It was a project their business had been involved in before. Steve had probably pulled some strings to make sure that Mia's family got this project. Donna wasn't sure if he'd done anything illegal, but she figured there were reasons Steve would have thought it best if there weren't a lot of questions. She decided to just forget about it. Her lawyer said she'd only be in jail for 6 months, but that wasn't a given. When she was released, it was often not at the expected time. Donna served 10 months before she was released. Once she was out, she started to think about the future. She was scared and determined. Steve was true to his word and there was no talk of divorce, but soon he would have to face the fact that he had a mountain to climb. Donna had countless hours to come up with a plan to convince Steve to try to save their marriage. She knew that counseling should be a part of it, but she also knew that Steve hadn't really thought much about the idea. As a result, she felt a mixture of joy and fear. It was no surprise that Steve was there to pick her up. Their first uncontrolled hug in 10 months was awkward at best. They both tried their best to look into each other's eyes. She quickly got into the car, fighting her growing fears. Steve called her parents to tell them they were heading home and handed her a thick manila envelope. Donna almost panicked before she realized that instead of the divorce papers she was afraid of, there were letters and drawings from the kids. Donna had a lot on her mind. She'd spent months trying to keep it all in, so when she got home, she was pretty overwhelmed. The rest of the way home was spent in silence, and it wasn't easy. Steve tried to keep the conversation going, but it was hard. He told her about the kids now and then. Donna glanced at her phone. Her husband was trying to read his thoughts and feelings. There were so many emotions on his face that it was impossible to read. Donna calmly accepted the fact that he was as confused as she was about how to proceed. As they pulled into the driveway, Donna saw a small crowd in her front yard. She recognized her parents and friends among the greeters. Her heart started beating faster when she read the welcome home. As soon as she got out of the car, a banner was hung on her porch. 3 small bodies attacked her, clinging tightly to her. She tried to fight it, but tears flowed down her face. All it took was 3 little voices shouting that word, "Mommy," over the next few minutes. Donna was hugged and kissed by many well-wishers, while her children crowded around her. She couldn't help but constantly she stroked each child's hair gently, and their world was turned upside down, as was the world of their parents. She promised herself that their family would be her top priority, and that she would fight for her marriage with everything she has and somehow provide them all with a safe family life. She was so lost in her thoughts that he surprised her. He stepped back to let her with their children and greet her well. She wished she could feel his presence before she felt his gentle touch on her shoulders. His warm breath on the back of her neck sent shivers down her spine. He bent down to speak, his words for her ears only. Inside, Donna wanted to turn around and throw herself into his arms, to confess her love and beg him to at least try to save their marriage. Her heart almost stopped when she finally realized what he was whispering. "I know it was difficult, and the road ahead will not be much easier. I don't like it, but I understand that we will need outside help. I'd like to try to arrange this marriage if you still want to, Donna." She turned and looked at him, her heart filling with the real hope that had been lost for so long. She nodded silently, her eyes filling with a new wave of tears. "I love you, Donna," he said softly. He said, "Welcome home, my wife. It's been almost a year of guilt, pain and torment, but it's finally over." Her husband's arms held her securely, and the children's arms wrapped around her waist and legs. She released him and buried her face in his chest, crying. Don Abel was finally here, home.